Good evening, everyone. I thought Josh might want to do How Great Thou Art, all the verses, nice and slow for us all. I don't know why I get really nervous doing this. I could sing in front of a huge crowd, but preaching makes me super nervous. So, having said that, if you're visiting with us, I am not a preacher, so don't hold that against us as a congregation, just hold it against me. A couple of quick announcements. If you like the crossword that Stephen normally does, I made an attempt at one. It's there on the other side of the doors. There's also a word find in there. I didn't know. Anything to keep my mind off a presentation, that's what I was doing. And then one other note, I forgot to mention to Drew this morning, but Warren Skolt sent back some pictures of the people receiving the grain, the maize that we helped them buy. And I put that as a report. So if you go under the current reports, under Warren Skolt's May 2025 or whatever I call it, it's just pictures, a quick note and all the pictures. And if you're like me, putting faces to the work really helps out. It helps humanize it. It really helps us to in my eyes, it gives value to what we're doing. It's not just faceless people that we're helping out. So anyway, that's on the website if you'd like to see that. Let's jump right in before I ramble on anymore. The topic tonight will be called Sifted Like Wheat. So you might recall that we'll just dive right in. Let's go to Luke chapter 22 and we'll see where we get this. If you don't recall, Luke chapter 22 and verse 31. Jesus is talking to Peter. In Luke chapter 22 and verse 31, he says, "Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you, that he might sift you like wheat." And then verse 32 we'll look at again, but it just goes along with the sentence. "But I have prayed for you, that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers." So that's what I want to look at, that sifting like wheat. What does that mean? I don't know that we'll get the answer, but I'll tell you. We'll look at it. When Gary read from 1 Peter, we know that the devil, the Satan, our adversary, roams around like a roaring lion. So we need to be on guard for that. And we know, at least here, he asked for Peter so that he can sift him. So we'll look at 3 different examples of what this sifting will look like. And then try to wrap it up and what we can do about it if we find ourselves being sifted. So here we have Job, if you'll recall. And the first couple of chapters of Job and the last chapters of Job, I find myself thinking about a lot. So that might be a huge reason why I came up with this topic. If we go to the book of Job, we have Satan before God, which is one of the things I think about. It's an interesting topic, and I don't know how it works. So if you're hoping like, oh, he's going to tell us what this all means, I don't know. But we do know that the scriptures say that Satan goes before God. In Job chapter 1, starting in verse 6, we'll read through 12. Book of Job, chapter 1, verse 6. "Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, 'From where have you come?' Satan answered the Lord and said, 'From going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it.' And the Lord said to Satan, 'Have you considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil?' Then Satan answered the Lord and said, 'Does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face.' And the Lord said to Satan, 'Behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand.' So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord." What's interesting here is that Satan is before God, and That's, like I said, interesting in and of itself. But Satan is the Hebrew word for adversary or accuser. So that adds another element to this. That's his whole MO, as it were. He's an accuser. He's the adversary of the righteous. In Revelation chapter 12, verse 10, which we'll come to later, it says that when the dragon falls from heaven, the great accuser is thrown down, is what it says there in Revelation chapter 12. So this exchange is interesting because Satan kind of accuses God of protecting Job, and God says, I know Job. Go ahead. Everything that he has is in your hand. So Job gets sifted like wheat. And when he does, because his possessions get taken away, raiders come, they take everything, and I would say the worst thing, all his children are at a feast, and they are all killed in this house. And these individual servants come back to tell you, hey, all of your stuff is gone, and now all your kids are dead. But Job's response to these horrible, horrible things is to worship. Same chapter, verse 20. After all these things have been reported to him, all these things have happened, verse 20. Then Job arose and tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshiped. And he said, naked I came from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. And I think this is a powerful example of when things are going horribly wrong, our natural inclination is to rage against everything, perhaps even God. But Job rises up, he tears his clothes in a sign of mourning, shaves his head, which is what all the cool kids do. Thank you, that was a joke, yes. It isn't. That's also a sign of mourning in the Old Testament when they had plenty of hair. But more importantly, he mourns and then he falls down in worship. And he says, I had all these great many things. I had these great children, and I'm a blameless and upright man, but the Lord gives and the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And what a great example that is, and how difficult that is to follow. So keep that in mind as we move on from Job. I could spend the entire time here, but we're not. I'm trying not to soapbox too much. If you've met me, you know how difficult that is. So now we have Peter. And here's the specific instance of Satan demanding to have Peter. Going back to Luke real quick. Luke chapter 22. Like I said, I'm nervous, and that makes my Bible not work with my hands. Luke chapter 22, 31 through 34. Like we read before, this is Jesus talking to Peter. Simon, Simon, behold, Satan demanded to have you that he might sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail, and when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Peter said to him, Lord, I am ready to go with you both to prison and to death. Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the rooster will not crow this day until you deny 3 times that you know me. So when Satan demands, there in verse 31, the you is plural in the original Greek that Luke wrote in. That first one, Satan demanded to have you. So it looks like he's talking about all the apostles. I think all the apostles are going to have a rough couple of days. They're all going to be sifted. But then Jesus switches it, that have demanded to have you, that he sift you like wheat. But I have prayed for you. That you is singular to Peter. So perhaps Satan asked for all the apostles, but it would be Peter who is the natural leader of them. If you read the Gospels at all, Peter is the first to take charge. He likes to jump in without a whole lot of a plan. And if you know me for any length of time, Peter is my favorite because I'm the same way. We'll just dive right in and we'll see what happens. Seat of my pants. That's how I live my entire life. Sometimes it works out. A lot of the times it doesn't. But so that's how. So Peter's the natural leader. Maybe he'll bring them all back. I really like this quote from Matthew Henry, a commentator. He says, Peter, who used to be the mouth of the rest, talking about the apostles, in speaking to Christ, his hear made the ear of the rest. So now he is instead of doing all the talking, he has to do the listening for everybody. He has made the ear of the rest, and what is designed for warning to them all of you shall be offended because of me. So that's an interesting aspect of this that I had never considered, that it's a warning to all the apostles, and then Peter comes back. But I like Peter's answer. He's like, no, Lord, that's not me. That might be James and John, but not me. I'll go with you to prison. I'll die for you. And Jesus answers him, no. Before the morning, you're going to deny that you have even met me, much less go to prison from me. But still in Peter's defense, if we go down a little bit to verse 54, same chapter, Luke 22, 49 through 51. Okay, making sure. There we are. This is the betrayal and the rest. So the crowd comes to arrest Jesus. Judas kisses him as the betrayer to identify Jesus. And then verse 49, and those who were around him saw what would follow. They said, Lord, shall we strike with the sword? And one of them struck the servant of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, no more of this. And he touched his ear and healed him. And then we learn that one of them struck the servant of the high priest. If you look at John chapter 18 and verse 10, John 18 and verse 10, it says, then Simon Peter, having a sword, drew it and struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. The servant's name was Malchus. So Peter is showing Jesus, no, I am the man I claim to be. Everybody else is shrinking back. He draws his sword. He goes for Malchus's head. Maybe Malchus does a matrix and gets out of the way and loses an ear. And then it's kind of outside the scope of the sermon, but it always amazes me that Jesus says, stop. Picks up that ear, or however, touches his ear and heals him. And they still arrest him and take him away. And I wonder a lot about Malchus, what his story was. Maybe farther along we'll know all about it. But that's interesting. If I lost an ear and then had it miraculously put back, I think I would have a change of heart. But anyway, so that's the defense that Peter gives. He also follows, but denies. If we go farther down to verse 54, same chapter, Luke 22, 54. Then they seized him, this is Jesus, and led him away, bringing him to the high priest's house. And Peter was following at a distance. When they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat down among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him as he sat in the light, looking closely at him and said, this man was also with him. But he denied it, saying, woman, I don't know him. And a little later, someone else saw him and said, you also are one of them. But Peter said, man, I'm not. And after an interval of about an hour, still another insisted, saying, certainly this man was with him, for he too is a Galilean. But Peter said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. In verse 61, we'll get you. And the Lord turned and looked at Peter. And Peter remembered the saying of the Lord, how he had said to him, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went out and wept bitterly. So there's no other record of the other apostles following. In John chapter 18, verses 15 and 16, it looks like John the apostle gets Peter in because he's known to the high priest, so he gains the entry, but then John disappears from the story. Whether he goes back, and we know he's going to be near the cross, but right now, John is nowhere to be found. So Peter's the only one to follow. And it amazes me that during all this trial, and while all this is going on, Jesus is over here getting tried and mocked and maybe beaten up. And I can just hear I don't know what you're talking about. And the rooster crows and Jesus just turns and looks. And that's all Peter can see. And he weeps bitterly. Because this is the man who said he's going to die for Jesus. He drew his sword against the crowd, and he's going to die for Jesus and take some people with him. He follows Jesus and says, I'm your man, Jesus. I'm going to prove you wrong. And then among the people in the courtyard, he denies even knowing Jesus. And this is his sifting. And then that 62, he went out and weeps bitterly. This denial of Jesus, Matthew and Mark in their account of this record Peter invoking a curse on himself with an oath in denial. So it's a little more severe than, no, I don't know what that is. So he's invoking a curse on him, saying, no. And that's in Matthew chapter 10, if you'd like to write that down. But we know he goes out and he weeps bitterly. And I can't imagine the Saturday into Sunday morning when he's all still thinking about this episode. And then he goes, he runs with John. John outruns him, but is first into the tomb to see that it's empty, and how amazed that must have been for him, and how that rekindled his faith. And he becomes a very powerful preacher, a leader in the church in its early days till his death. From Acts chapter 2 through chapter 10, Peter is the primary person. I don't want to say character. He's not made up. He's the focal point of that first part of Acts. And we see Peter's full transformation, that he stands up and he preaches to the whole crowd, and 3,000 were saved out of that group. And he gets beaten for Jesus. And when the Acts class that we just finished up, we talked about how remarkable it is that when the apostles were beaten, all of them were beaten for preaching Jesus. They were happy about it, that they were able to suffer for Christ. And what a huge transformation that was. So that's how Peter comes through this sifting, that he is brought low, that he was overconfident, and Jesus says, you're going to deny that you even know me before the morning comes. And then Jesus looks at him, and how awful that Saturday must have been. But he brings it around. And now we'll look at one last influence here of Judas. And you think, what's going on here? The reason I'll call this sifting, and I'm not going to be dogmatic about it. If you think it's not, then I'll concede the point. But it does say that Satan enters Judas' heart. And that is, there it is. We can stay in Luke 22 since we're already there. It's just way back up. Luke chapter 22, verses 3 and through 6. Then Satan entered into Judas called Iscariot, who was of the number of the 12. He went away and conferred with the chief priests and officers how he might betray him to them. And they were glad and agreed to give him money. So he consented and sought an opportunity to betray him to them in the absence of a crowd. So that's Satan entering into the heart. There's a account in John chapter 12. We'll go ahead and read it. John chapter 12, the first 8 verses, is right before this event. John chapter 12, verses 1 through 8. It says, 6 days before the Passover, Jesus therefore came to Bethany, where Lazarus was, whom Jesus had raised from the dead. So they gave him a dinner for him there. Martha served, and Lazarus was one of those reclining with him at table. Mary, therefore, took a pound of expensive ointment made from pure nard and anointed the feet of Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. The house was filled with the fragrance of the perfume, but Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples, he who was about to betray him, said, "Why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor?" He said this not because he cared about the poor, but because he was a thief. And having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. Jesus said, "Leave her alone, so that she may keep it for the day of my burial. For the poor you always have with you, but you do not always have me." The reason I bring this up is I think this was a public rebuke in front of the other 11 guys, maybe some other disciples, in front of Mary and Lazarus and Martha. And Jesus says, "Leave her alone. I know you're a thief. The other guys don't, but I know." And maybe this was Judas trying to get back at him, but maybe it was also just that entryway of Satan. Either way, Satan enters Judas' heart. And then we know that he hangs himself. So Satan enters his heart. He betrays Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. And then here in Matthew chapter 27, verses 3 through 5, that's up there. Then when Judas, his betrayer, saw that Jesus was condemned, he changed his mind and brought back the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and the elders, saying, I have sinned by betraying innocent blood." And they said, "What is that to us? See to it yourself." And throwing down the pieces of silver into the temple, he departed. He went and hanged himself. But the chief priests, taking the pieces of silver, said, "It's not lawful to put them into the treasury since it's blood money." And they buy the field where Judas hangs himself. He couldn't handle the guilt. I think this line, when Judas saw that Jesus was condemned, that changed it for him. Not that he was, I don't think he thought that they were going to kill Jesus, is the long story short. I think they thought they were going to question him, maybe give him a polite beating and send him on his way. Or Jesus would disappear like he had before, or work his way out of the crowd. Whatever reason, Judas sees that Jesus is condemned and this is it. And he goes and he throws the money back, and the answer is cold. What is that to us? But Judas did not endure this sifting. I am confident in this. This is a hill I believe truly in. I am confident that if Judas would have waited till Sunday morning, maximum of 3 days, Jesus would have forgiven him. Just like he did Peter. We read that at the end of John when Jesus is talking to Peter. He says, "Do you love me?" And Peter goes, "I do. Please quit asking me." So if Judas would have waited, I guarantee Jesus would have forgiven him also. Just like Paul. Paul did some horrible things to Christians. And Paul was forgiven and given another chance. So this sifting that Judas endured, or he didn't endure it at all. So just real quick, if you think that death is the only way out, I know that this is an issue near and dear to some hearts here, that this has touched this congregation at least a couple of times. If taking your own life is the only way out, please reach out. Please. King David understands. If you read some of those Psalms, David gets it. Elijah understands. After the big battle at Mount Carmel, Elijah runs and he wants to die. And God says, no, I got work for you to do. So we gotta reach out. Don't think that that's the way out. There's some times where I've been through some dark times myself, and I prayed that I would not wake up, just because it was overwhelming for me. But God said no. He said, my grace is sufficient for you, Mark. So, if you think that is the answer, call me. I'll stop what I'm doing. We'll talk. So, let's lean on each other. So now, how can we endure beyond what we just talked about? Satan is not omnipotent. We look at that story of Job and we think, man, what great power that Satan had, that God allowed him to do. He took everything he had, and then in the next chapter, he does give him some sickness. And so he's wallowing in ashes when his buddies come. But Satan is not omnipotent. His power is limited. He is not God's opposite. And I can't remember where I read this, who was talking about this. I should have quoted it. But it's not God is the good and Satan is the evil and their equivalent power. That is not how to look at it. Satan is not God's opposite. He is not equal to God. He asked permission from God for both Job and Peter, and then maybe Ahab. There's an interesting exchange in 1 Kings 22 of a prophet who talks about a vision that he sees of basically the throne room of God, and God talking about who's going to talk to Ahab. And it just says, Spirit, I'll go. And then lies to him, and then he dies in the next chapter. King Ahab does. So maybe that. But we have documented proof. Satan asks for permission for Job and for permission from Peter. He is powerful, yes, do not underestimate it. But yes, he can be overcome. So how do we do that? Put your armor on. Ephesians chapter 6. And verse 10. Verse 10 is my favorite. So in the directory where it says, what's your favorite verse? Ephesians 6:10. It's my password until they make me change it, and then you can't use the same one. I don't know. It's horrible. But anyways, Ephesians chapter 6, verse 10. Finally, be strong in the Lord and the strength of his might. Be strong in the Lord and the power of his might, some other versions say. Put on the whole armor of God that you might be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore take up the whole armor of God that you may be able to withstand in the evil day. And having done all, to stand firm. Stand therefore, having fastened on the belt of truth, and having put on the breastplate of righteousness, and as shoes for your feet, having put on the readiness given by the gospel of peace. In all circumstances take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming darts of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, praying at all times in the Spirit with all prayer and supplication. To that end, keep alert, with all perseverance, making supplication for all the saints. So when God's first, when you're wearing armor, and I've never worn armor per se, but I've worn firefighting gear. And so, yeah, when you're wearing that, you don't forget that you have it on. It's heavy, it's hot. It's just as hot inside the suit or as your body is. So it's not a good time a lot of the times. But you remember that you have it on. You be mindful that you have that on. Because when God is first, everything else becomes second. It allows us to see the big picture more easily, and that's always a dangerous thing. I think we get into the forest, into the weeds, however you want to look at it, and you can't see anything else but what's right here. A bigger view helps endurance. Paul in Romans chapter 5 and verse 3, he says in Romans 5 and verse 3, not only that, but we rejoice in our sufferings, knowing that suffering produces endurance. So when there is some sifting, when there is some trials, we can overcome that with the armor of God, with our faith, with prayer, so that we can endure. And then in that same book, Romans chapter 8 and verse 18, Paul writes again, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us." It's another big picture thing. Sometimes we get caught up in living our lives and trying to get either to the next paycheck or through this next thing, and we lose picture that this is just a temporary place for us. This world is not my home, we sing sometimes. And we need to be reminded of that. That sufferings here are not worth comparing to the glory that is revealed to us. Kind of in the same vein as that last slide. This verse from Galatians 6, chapter 6 and verse 2. "Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." So when you're having this burden, when you feel that you're being sifted, reach out. And I'm the world's worst at that. So this whole sermon is directed squarely at me, like most of them are. It's very difficult for me to ask for help. But we have to, because you can be strong where I am not. I can be strong where you are not. And then we all get to that glory that Paul was talking about, where there will be no more problems, where we'll be before the throne of God, worshiping Him for all eternity. So bear one another's burdens. Help your brethren. Finally, I said we'd get to the Revelation chapter 12. I wish Stephen was here, because this is his thesis for all of Revelation, is God wins. So that was for him. Revelation 12, verse 9, starting. "And the great dragon was thrown down, that ancient serpent, who was called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world. He was thrown down to the earth, and his angels were thrown down with him. And I heard a loud voice in heaven saying, 'Now the salvation and the power and the kingdom of our God and the authority of his Christ have come. For the accuser of our brothers has been thrown down, who accuses them night and day before our God.'" Verse 11. "And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they loved not their lives even to death." Conquered Satan by the blood of the Lamb. That blood saves us all. And that is something to always remember, that Jesus beat Satan. Satan has never been as powerful as God, and Jesus ruined the last thing for him, that we shouldn't be afraid of death because of that glory that awaits each of us. If we wear that armor and we are washed in that blood of the Lamb that conquers the devil, that blood saves us all. And then finally, let's look at Romans chapter 8. I could nearly read this whole chapter, but I won't. Chapter 8, verses 31 through 39. For some encouragement that God does win. Romans 8, verse 31. "What shall we say to these things? If God is for us, who can be against us?" God is for us, Satan is against us, and that doesn't matter because God is for us. Verse 32, "He, God, who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Who shall bring any charge against God's elect? It is God who justifies. Who is to condemn? Christ Jesus is the one who died, more than that, who was raised, who is at the right hand of God, who indeed is interceding for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or danger of sword? As it is written, for your sake we're being killed all the day long, and we're regarded as sheep to be slaughtered. No, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him who loved us. For I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all of creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. So when you are low and you are depressed and you think that this power of Satan is working against you and you cannot come out of this, nothing is able to separate you from the love of God. Nothing. So lean on that. Lean on that. No outside force can ever separate us from God and his saving love, that salvation of God. I hope this was an encouragement to you. I think I needed this one. I've been thinking about this since the John class, Drew. But it's a little heavy, but I think we need to be reminded of that thing. And we don't know, unless you let us know, what's going through. We got some people in this congregation that are going through a very rough time. And so reach out. Make sure that if you are going through a rough time, you reach out because we can help you. We can remind you that you cannot be separated from that love of God from an outside force. Only you can do it to yourself. So remember that. We haven't talked about how to become a Christian, but we can do that for you tonight if that's your will, if your desire. If you wish to be baptized for the remission of your sins, to rise and walk in newness of life so that you cannot be separated from the love of God, we can help you with that today, right now. If you've been having some troubles and you need prayers, you need to lean on us, let us know. Go to the back where the elders are while we stand and sing.